Welcome to Construction Operations Module number 2. By now you should have made it through Module number 1 and done the assignments and the quizzes that went along with Module number 1, so you should be aware of kind of how this goes. And there's a quiz that goes along with Module number 2 also. So really be paying attention and maybe open up that quiz at the same time you're watching this module. That'll really help you to be able to answer those questions as you're going through it. But today, we're going to talk about use of construction documents on the job site. And so there's a lot of different construction document types on a job site. And a superintendent or job site manager needs to be very familiar with all these different document types, how to use them, why they're important, what's in them, because that's going to help that person to be able to manage that site more effectively. And so today we're going to go over that, and then we're going to focus in on some of the document types, and I'm going to go over an assignment with you. I first want to give you an overview of all the different document types that are on a job site. And that starts right off with the general conditions of the contract. And so when we think of general conditions, a lot of times people think about things like job site trailers and porta-johns on the job site. And I want to tell you and clarify for you that that's not necessarily general conditions on the job site. General conditions of the contract are different. General conditions of the contract are what you should think of as the rules of the game. When you hear people talk about general conditions being those other things, they're really talking about general requirements of the job site. And you'll see that a couple of items down on this list. But the general conditions of the contract are the rules of the game, how people are going to interact with each other. It defines relationships between the owner and all the agents and the contractor. It's kind of a playbook for the project and contains legal language that honestly is kind of usually in favor of the owner. But that's the general conditions of the contract. The supplementary conditions of the contract are anything that's added to that, additional provisions and notifications of the general conditions. So anything that wasn't in the normal general conditions, they're going to put into the supplementary conditions. So just as important as the general conditions, you need to know what's in the supplementary conditions. Then once again, like I mentioned before, the general requirements, those are the things that you usually think of that people call general conditions, like the job site trailer, the porta-johns, how we're going to do things on the job site fencing, the security that's required for the job site. If the owner wants a webcam that's pointed directly at the job all day long, that would probably be in the general requirements because that's something that they're requiring. Okay, the next thing down the list, you know about these by now, hopefully, drawings, plans. These are your architectural drawings, your civil drawings, your structural drawings, your mechanical drawings, your electrical drawings. I don't have to stop there. We've got fire protection drawings. We can go really deep into the amount of drawings, but those are the basics of the different types of drawings. And I'm pretty sure you have had a chance to look at all types of drawings throughout your college career here, and so I'm not going to go into those. You should have an understanding of what those are by now. Just like the next thing, which is the specifications. By this point in your college career, you should know what the specifications of the contract are. Those are going to be divisions 1 through 16, or maybe divisions 1 through 32, depending on what the architect uses. Most projects are using divisions 1 through 32, the CSI specification divisions. And so those will be where you go for all of the detailed information about each individual piece of material or type of construction that's going on the project. If you need to know something, go to the plans, go to the specifications about that particular piece of construction. And then we have our soils report. Is it important for you to read the soils report? Hopefully you're shaking your head right now, because it's very important for you to read the soils report. The soils report has so much information in it that could affect cost, could affect schedule, could affect the design, all of those things. Now, the engineer, the civil engineer and structural engineer will use the soils report to design the foundations of the project, but that doesn't always remain the same once that's designed. I'll tell you, I had a project where we got the soils report, and the soils report said to remove massive amounts of material that were on the site and bring in engineered fill. But the structural engineer had designed it so that we were drilling caissons down through all of this engineered fill that we were bringing in. So we weren't even necessarily using that engineered fill. So we had the building completely redesigned, the foundation system, to spread footings so that we were bearing on that engineered fill, and we saved ourselves $100,000 just like that. But then what happened is we started digging out for bringing in our engineered fill, and we found that right beneath our engineered fill there was this layer of really dark organic material that the geotechnical engineer didn't like. By this point we were way too far to redesign anything. So what he said that we needed to do is we needed to, once we got in the engineered fill, is dig down our spread footings through the engineered fill and then down through that dark stuff until we reach the bottom of that, then fill it back up with slurry, which is a very weak concrete, and then pour our spread foundations on top of that. Well, digging down through all of that material and then bringing it back up with slurry costs money, right? And so that ended up costing us $100,000. We should have just stayed with the caissons in the first place. But what I'm trying to tell you is geotechnical reports are very important. Now, one thing about that geotechnical report is it didn't say anything about that dark layer of material that we ended up having to dig through. So the owner did have to pay that extra $100,000. They would have had to pay for it in the caissons or with that slurry, but either way they had to pay for it. So those reports are important. Addenda will come along with a bid. Usually you'll see these on like hard bid projects. You'll have some addenda that go with it. You need to make sure that you, I shouldn't say that's just hard bid projects. It's all types of projects, but you'll have addenda that go along with your plans that say you need to do this in addition to the plans. Alternates are kind of the same thing, but alternates can be accepted or not accepted. So an alternate may be like we have a membrane roof on it, but we want to know how much would it cost to get rid of that membrane roof and put on a metal roof. So the alternate would be a metal roof versus a membrane roof. And the owner could accept that or not accept that. And then the last and final part of this is the agreement. So the agreement is the thing that puts it all together, that names all of these construction documents and says all of these construction documents are part of the contract, and sign your name at the bottom. Ties it all together. There are other things that are part of the construction documents. Things like the schedule, things like the subcontracts, change orders, purchase orders, and most importantly for our discussion today is the submittals and shop drawings. I really want to spend some time today talking to you about the importance of submittals and shop drawings on the construction process and on job site management. When I graduated, I did not know much about submittals and shop drawings. And when I came back to teach, I said, I'm not going to let anybody graduate this program without knowing about submittals and shop drawings and the importance of them and the reasons behind them. Okay? So that's what we're going to go through today, because it is so important for superintendents to understand what submittals and shop drawings are and the importance to the construction process, the importance to getting those approved, the importance for the quality of the project, which, as you'll remember, is part of a superintendent's duty on the job, to make sure that we hit that quality standard, if you remember correctly. Okay, so there's 3 basic types of submittals on a job. Not saying there's not more, but if we're going to narrow it down, we've got 3 basic types: product data, shop drawings, and samples. Okay, and we're going to go into what each of those is here in a minute. But why are they required on a job? Well, the architect and engineer require them. The architect and engineer are asking for them. And when I first got out there into the industry, I said, well, why are we giving these things to the architect and engineer? They've already designed it in the plans. It's on the plans. Well, now we're submitting it to them to be approved. Didn't they draw it in the first place? I mean, if we're putting in what's in the plans, why do we have to get it approved by them again? It was just a really confusing process to me. And so eventually I got to the point where I understood the importance of these things. So the architect and engineer need to verify that the correct products will be installed on the project. So while, yes, they designed it in the drawings, sometimes contractors want to put in something different. And the architect and engineer want to verify that exactly what they're designing gets put in on the job. It also gives the architect the opportunity to select colors or patterns that may not have been decided at the beginning of the project. And so a lot of times this is like carpet and paint and things like that. So they may have said, we want Sherwin-Williams paint, but they didn't specify exactly what colors they want. Or they specified some colors that they thought they wanted, but then they want to see actual samples of it to verify that that's really what they want. It's an opportunity not to change products, but to clarify them. Okay? So they didn't change from Sherwin-Williams to a different company. They just clarified that they wanted that color. Or they might have specified that they wanted this level of carpet quality or this type of carpet tile. And they didn't necessarily tell us which exact one they wanted. So now they want to look at them and they say, okay, I want that one. So they're clarifying. It's very important that you understand that it's not an opportunity for them to change things. Now, they will change things, okay? I'm not saying that they won't, because they will, and it'll get frustrating. But that's not the true purpose of submittals, okay? For materials requiring fabrication, the architect and engineer will need to review and verify details. Those details probably provided by the fabricator of that material. So the engineer, verification of fabrication. So they're going to figure out, or they're going to approve how it's being made, or the way that it's going together. And so we'll talk about that here in a minute. Okay, so the first type, remember I said I was going to go through the different types with you, is product data. And when we talk about product data, we're really talking about a piece of paper. or multiple pieces of paper. But this just contains information about the product. Okay, so for example, a mix design for concrete. A mix design will tell you what type of aggregate it has in it, how much of each type of aggregate it has in it. It will tell you the PSI of the concrete. It'll tell you the water cement ratio of the concrete. If there's any additives in the concrete, it'll tell you things like what consistency the concrete is. And so you can see that probably right here. And you can see all of those things I just talked about, but there's also additional things that are part of the product data, like some of the additives that go into it. So like fiber mesh, or like the break histories. So the break histories will be attached to the product data. And so those are all part of it. And that's product data. But there's going to be product data for just about everything on the job. There's going to be product data for your studs, your drywall, your mud, your carpet, your everything that goes into the project will usually have some sort of product data that goes with it. It's just part of the job. And so anybody that manufactures something for construction will usually put together some form of product data that can be submitted to the architects and engineers for verification and approval. So there's also descriptions, finish characteristics, specific job dimensions a lot of times for that particular piece of product in product information, product data. Okay, so when you think of product data, think of paper. Now, shop drawings. Shop drawings are a little bit different. And shop drawings are a set of drawings. And you may ask, well, we have a set of drawings. Why are we asking our subcontractor to draw another set of drawings and then submitting that to the people who already drew the drawings in the first place? You may be asking that because that was a question that I asked also when I first got out of school. And I was like, why are we doing this? Well, a lot of times in the shop drawings, you're going to get more information than you did when you had just the architectural or just the structural drawings. So while the structural engineer may tell you in the drawings that he wants a W10 by 100 column, it'll be needed in this location right here. The structural steel shop drawings will show that column's exact length, what it needs to be cut to. It'll show the weld plates on it and what it needs to be welded to, and the weld size and the weld location and the attachment detail for the joist or for the girder. And it'll show all of those things on the shop drawings. So much more detail. Detail for fabrication, detail for installation, and also all of the locations so that the architect and engineer can verify that those locations are exactly where they want it per their drawings, and that is being fabricated and installed the way they want it to be fabricated and installed. Okay, so it's their drawn version of what is shown on the construction documents. Makes sense. So where do we see shop drawings in the construction process? Well, most people think structural steel. That's the example that I gave you. So structural steel will definitely have shop drawings. But things like precast, maybe precast concrete, precast tunnels, any type of precast will have shop drawings. Any type of pre-manufactured materials. So, we're in an age of prefab for jobs. Anything that's being prefabbed to come into a job will have some type of shop drawings that go with it. And then you've got Doors, frames, and hardware. That's a load of fun. Trust me, when you get to review your first doors, frames, and hardware submittal, that's going to be a blast for you. But that's going to have shop drawings. How about toilet partitions and accessories? Well, not the accessories part, but toilet partitions. Those are going to have shop drawings to make sure they're in the right spot, to make sure they're the right dimensions. Your glass and glazing or storefronts, those are going to have shop drawings. Why? Well, that's because they do things like put them between columns, like masonry columns. So on the conference center project on North Campus of NAU, you'll find masonry columns. And those masonry columns, per the plans and specifications, should be this exact dimension between each one. Well, they're close, okay? But nothing's ever exact in construction. There's tolerances. And so we had to come in after those columns were built and measure the distance between those columns so that we could build the glass and glazing that went in between them to the exact right dimension. If we hadn't have done that, we might have had bigger gaps for the caulking. That might have been out of the caulking specification in between the mullions of the glass and the masonry columns. So there's things like that. We need to take field dimensions. And so sometimes there's comparison information that needs to happen. We need to compare what is on the project versus what is on the shop drawings. If there's any changes to the plans and specifications, because the plans and specifications weren't exactly right, and we needed to change those in the shop drawings, this will give them the opportunity to do that. And then info needed to fabricate the product. So we talked about fabrication. If they need any specific info at the fabrication shop, it'll be on those shop drawings. So the next one is samples. Next type. So we have product data, we have shop drawings, and we have samples. So samples is a physical portion of the specified product. It's an actual piece of the product. It's usually required by the architect for finish selection like paint and carpet. And then sometimes we have things that are called mock-ups, which are actually a actual constructed piece of the building to see how everything comes together. And so this is an example of a mock-up that was out on the conference center that I just told you, some of these columns I was telling you about. And so this is a couple of different types of brick. So on that building, there's a whole bunch of different types of brick. And they wanted to see how these two brick colors worked together. And then this next one is actual precast panels that they put, the spandrel panels that were on the side of the parking garage. And the architect was not real excited about the idea of embedding these brick pieces, the flat brick pieces, into that spandrel panel concrete, all precast. And so we had these mock-up panels made, and then we drove down to Phoenix where they made these and sat there, and he tried to pry them off best he could, trying to get those things off there. But there was a couple of different kinds for him to choose from, the small ones, the big ones, the different colors, because we were trying to match those columns that you saw in the previous picture. And so this was his opportunity to really make sure that this worked. There was also a sandblasting that he was able to look at and approve the sandblasting on it. There was also color in the spandrel panels, like a dark or a light brown color, and he was able to approve that. So samples and shop drawings are important. Right here, this is a project that has a lot of samples and shop drawings. So you'll notice, or you'll recognize this as the North Quad of NAU. And so in case you didn't know, which you may not have, there used to be a road / parking lot that went right through the middle of the North Quad. It had ever since the beginning of NAU. And so, yeah, this is a picture of it right here, of the road and what this used to look like back in the early 1900s. And so my project was to tear out that road and put in grass and make it a park, which most of the time we get to make parks into parking lots, not parking lots into parks. So it was actually a really cool project. But in this, you'll see these concrete benches. In those concrete benches, there's these things that they fabricated that make skate stops. And so I got an example for you here. This is one right here. And so this is a submittal of those skate stops. So they poured those concrete benches and then they cut slices into them and stuck those in there so that all those skateboarders, sorry skateboarders out there, could hit these or not hit these because they would decide not to do the sliding on the rail thing. I don't know what you call it, guys, but you know that's what this was all about. The holes in it were so that it accepted the epoxy that these were put into and it would become one with it. And so this was a sample that we used for that. By the way, these took too long to get approved, and so by the time we got them approved and installed, there was already people sliding on these things and leaving the black marks on them and putting the wax or whatever else they put on these things. So, yeah, it worked eventually. Now here, this is in that same area, and this is the 1899 grill. And so this is the back patio of it. And the samples and shop drawings that I wanted to point out to you here was in the distance, you can see that there's an old building. Well, it's tied to the wall. So the wall has brick that's associated with it. And then it's tied to a wall back over here where you can see the old building. And so the samples and shop drawings on this one where we needed to match a rake pattern on that old brick with this new brick. And so we went down to Phoenix Brick, who could actually try to match this and matched it as best they possibly could and gave that to the architect, and he said, yep, that's close enough. The other thing here, you'll see that the stone caps of that brick wall, that was also a sample submittal because those were supposed to be precast concrete. But our mason came to us and he said, hey, we can get something real stone that looks better than this precast concrete and we can get it cheaper. And so we had to bring this stone to the architect and say, is this okay, first of all, and then what color do you want? And so we ended up having different colors to be approved. And so here's a couple of those different colors. One's called H Rust and one's called Buckskin. And they're very similar, but you'll see that there's a little bit of difference between those things. And so we brought these to the architect and said, which one would you like? And I think they ended up going with the Buckskin. So this is the actual sample that was approved by the architect for that particular project right there. Okay, so submittals themselves have to have a process, okay, and that's going to be different for most of the projects out there. But the process is going to be different on how you submit these things, probably what project management program you're using to electronically send them to the architects, send them to the engineers. Some architects want you to send it to them first and then they distribute it to the engineers. That's usually not a fast process. But if you can get it to where you can send it to the engineers and the architect and the owner and whoever needs to do the approval on these things all at the same time, that's going to be faster. There's also going to be deadlines for these things. So whether that's we're going to send it to the architect has 2 weeks to approve it, and then it gets sent back to us. We have a week to approve it before we send it to the architect, so that's 3 weeks right there. And then we send it back to the subcontractor. The subcontractor can't order materials until the submittal is approved. So this process is extremely important, and it needs to be a definitive process, and it needs to be managed, because if those submittals don't get approved, guess what? We don't have materials on the site. We can't build the project. So why is this so important that I'm talking about product data and submittals in job site management? Is because you can't manage a job site where there's no materials to actually build the job. If the superintendent is not right on top of the product data and the samples and the shop drawings and making sure those are getting submitted and approved and the materials are getting to the site, he's not going to have a job to build. And yes, this may fall on some of the project engineers and some of the project managers to do this work, but ultimately, the building being built and being built on time is the superintendent's responsibility. So there has to be a definitive process for this. And what I want to talk to you about and what your assignment is going to be is a procurement schedule or procurement log. You'll hear me use those two things interchangeably. A procurement schedule is how are we going to get through that process for every submittal that's on the job. When we talk about how many submittals are on a project, we're talking hundreds and sometimes thousands of submittals that need to be processed and approved to get all of the materials that need to be built for a project onto a project. So remember when we talked about why construction was so cool, and we said there's thousands of parts and pieces that need to come together to make that project. Well, each one of those parts and pieces needs a submittal to be approved before it can be ordered so that it can be put together and come together to make that building. So this is an important process. And so in talking about what we want to do as superintendents, the superintendents need to manage the procurement process. So that's going to be part of your assignment. I'm going to take a minute here and then I'm going to explain your assignment to you while showing you some Excel spreadsheets and some other things that you need to put together for your assignment. Okay, I want to talk to you about your assignment now. And this assignment is a procurement log. And this is going to be a valuable tool for a superintendent. Being able to track and monitor all of the submittals to make sure that things are going to arrive on site and that contracts by the project manager are being written on time so that things can arrive on site. Because ultimately, the superintendent is responsible for getting that building built on time and keeping that schedule. And so understanding what a procurement log is critical for a superintendent. Now, the first thing you're going to do in this assignment is you're going to build a schedule. And this schedule is for a restroom. A restroom, let's say, in the engineering building. And this schedule is going to contain all of these different areas. So this may include stud framing, plumbing rough-in, electrical rough-in. All of these things in this list are included, but there's also other things that need to be included in your schedule. So just because I have something on here doesn't mean there isn't more to it. So these will all be in your schedule that you need to schedule in Microsoft Project. You need to do that first. So schedule out this restroom basically from studs through completion. And all of these things are part of it. A restroom has a lot of parts and pieces. And so it's pretty amazing the amount that goes into just a restroom of a building. And so that's going to be the first piece of it. After you get that schedule done, you're going to work on your procurement log. So you're going to create a procurement log in Microsoft Excel based on the dates that you need to start each activity. So you're going to use your Microsoft project schedule and the dates that are in that schedule to build your procurement log. The procurement log will be built in Excel. Now, there's a lot of project management softwares that do procurement logs now, but and some people even include it in their schedule, which is fine. But we're going to do it in Excel so that you understand exactly what a procurement log or procurement schedule is. Okay, it should contain the section number that comes from the specs, the item, what is it that we are submitting? Is it a sample? Is it a shop drawing? Is it carpet? What is it? The date for the letter of intent to the subcontractor, the date that the submittal goes to the contractor from the subcontractor, the date that the submittal goes from the contractor to the architect, the date that the submittal goes from the architect to the contractor, the date that it goes to the subcontractor so that they can order the materials, and then the date that it needs to be delivered. So needs to be the install date of your schedule. So you're going to look at your procurement or your Microsoft project schedule to get that delivery date. Now, you're going to use your best judgment and individual research to determine lead times for each item. Some items in this list will have a long lead time for procurement and some won't. Okay, so let me walk through this with you real quick. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to create a schedule. Now, this schedule of one item that I have right here has carpet. You don't have carpet in a bathroom. I hope you don't have carpet in a bathroom. That would be absolutely disgusting. But this is my example for you, is carpet. So you're going to install carpet. You put all, your whole schedule together and this is your date. So you need to install carpet on 1/27. That's your date for installation of carpet. So now you're going to build a spreadsheet in Excel that looks like this. And so it has the letter of intent or section number, the item, the letter of intent to the contractor. That's going to be the date, date to the architect, date to the contractor, back to the contractor, your order date, and your delivery date. So we know from this that carpet needs to be there on 1/27. Okay? Now, we're going to go backwards through this list. Your order date. So the difference between your order date and the delivery date is going to be your lead time. So this is going to vary for all of your different materials. So if you're installing your HVAC, that's going to take a lot longer to get that material than it is going to take to get, let's say, paint. All right. And so let's say we can buy our carpet in 2 weeks. So I'm going to do formulas here. So equals this date minus 14 days. Okay, so we need to order the material by then. Now, to the contractor, the difference between the order date and to the contractor is how long it takes to get the submittal approval from the contractor back to the subcontractor. So let's say we can do that pretty quick. Let's give ourselves 2 days. From to the architect to contractor, that is the review time for the architect. Now, a minimum review time for an architect is usually 2 weeks. So let's give him or her at least 3. We want to make sure that we have time in there in case the architect rejects it and we need to resubmit it. So let's give 3 weeks. So that is this date minus 21 days. Okay. Now from the contractor to the architect, that is the review time for the contractor. So the contractor will usually try to get these reviewed pretty quick before they send them to the architect. And there might also be time that if the contractor rejects it and sends it back to the subcontractor, that you need some buffer time in there. So usually you try to get them reviewed in a week. Let's give the contractor 2 weeks just in case we need to get these submittals redone. So we're going to take this date minus 14 days. Now, the time of the letter of intent and the submittal going to the contractor is the amount of time it takes for the subcontractor to get the submittal together. So to prepare the submittal. Now this is going to be probably longer for shop drawings than product data. Product data is, remember, just paper. And so sending paper versus drawing shop drawings is probably going to take a little bit longer. So let's give the subcontractor 2 weeks so that we have time to do shop drawings. So this is going to be equal to this date minus 2 weeks. Now the letter of intent, that's not necessarily, you're not contracted yet, but usually the submittal, the subcontractor will begin doing submittals once you issue them the letter of intent. Okay, that was kind of rough. Let me say that again. The subcontractor will begin putting together submittals once you give them the letter of intent. And then you'll work on their contract, and hopefully you'll have the contract in place before they need to order it, because they may not order materials based on a letter of intent. They may need a contract before they order materials. But what this tells you right here is that the letter of intent for your carpet subcontractor needed to be in place by 11/23. So if it's not in place, and we're sitting right now at, well, what is I don't know what the date is when you're watching this, but if it's right before, say it's 1/13, then we're in trouble if we don't have a letter of intent issued. And the superintendent is going to be calling the project manager and saying, what in the world is going on here? Now, I'm going to copy these formulas down so that I can plug things in. So for carpet, I'm going to say that all of this is the same, like all of it's 127, okay? And so all of these dates are going to end up being the same, but there may be some of these where it's not the same. Now, where did I get this? Which submittals need to be submitted for carpet? Well, if you had listened in the lecture, you'll know that that comes from your specifications. So let's go look in our specifications for what submittals we're going to need to process. So I've got the specifications sheet right here. And so this is carpet. So I'm going to look up carpet, and I'm going to see submittals. And it's going to say product data, shop drawings, samples, lead submittals, product schedule for carpet, use same designations indicated on drawings, and maintenance data. Okay, so all of that needs to be submitted by my carpet subcontractor. And so that's what's going to be in my list. So in your assignment, the stuff that you put in for each and every material in the restroom is each going to have different submittals. Some are going to have shop drawings, some won't. Some will have lead submittals, or some will have samples and some won't. But you need to look into the specifications for that. So on the engineering building, I've given you the specifications that you can look through, and you're going to make your own schedule based on the restrooms here in the engineering building. And I'm less concerned with the durations on your schedule, because this is not scheduling class, as I am with you paying attention to, okay, there's different lead times. So let's say there was a different lead time for the shop drawings here. So I'm going to give the shop drawings 28 days. Okay, all of a sudden that pushes that back to 11/9. So really all these need to be in by 11/9 because it's the same subcontractor. But I need you to pay attention to the different dates in here. Some of these will be the same, like the architect's review time, 2 weeks, the contractor's review time, 1 week. All of that should be the same. But over here, lead times, the difference between these two, you need to pay attention to that because it's going to be different for different materials and different subcontractors. And so what you're going to turn into me is your Microsoft project schedule that better look a whole lot better than this one right here. Your Excel file, which is going to be a whole lot longer than this one right here. This is one item, and you've got all the materials that are in a restroom to do. So this is going to be a multi-page document by the time you're done that you're going to turn in. So a schedule and an Excel document that has all the dates in it. I'd like you to turn those in PDF. You can also turn in the files if you would like to. That's up to you. But you're going to put together this procurement schedule, this procurement log. And I'm doing this because this is important for you to understand as a superintendent. This is important for job site management. This is important for getting a building built. It's critical. And so give me a call if you have any questions. Send me an email if you have any questions on this assignment.